we left off talking about some of the, the enemies of lane splitting, misconceptions of, the police and other public bodies and how you overcame them. I think the biggest misconception in my mind isn't, or maybe misconception is not the right word, but the biggest body you have to convince that this is good for is not motorcyclists. And it's not, Congress. It's the majority of people driving, as you so coldly put them, in cages. But to all the automotive people out there that don't give a flying crap about motorcyclists, how do you get them to want to get behind a bill like this?
You're talking about cars, right?
Yeah.
Like the majority.
The majority of
society
people,
in general.
Society that does not care about motorcycling, that are driving along in their Chevy Cavalier or more likely their Ford F-150. Why do they care about this?
Yeah. I go back to, everybody knows somebody who was in an accident. Everybody knows a friend, a relative, whatever. And I go back to stories, and somehow you've got to relate to people on a personal level to say, hey, here's how many people have, been in an accident, whatever, make it personal. Again, in my situation, hearing from people who never even thought about this, their hook was thinking about safety and thinking about, hey, does your dad ride? Does your mom ride? Does, whatever. And how would you feel if they were XYZ? And so they made it personal. And so to me, that seems the biggest way. At the same time, part of the Minnesota law, we put in there $200,000 for educational opportunities.
Yes, I wanted to ask about this.
Yeah, for the state. Now, what we haven't talked about as much as the, state troopers talked about this, there are a lot of bureaucrats that are frankly throwing sand in the gears too, saying, this is going to be too difficult to administer. Let's not do this, whatever. At the end of the day, I don't know in your state, but we have, the big signs over various lanes of traffic to say, buckle up, whatever.
Right. There
are ways you can start educating the public saying, hey, coming 2025, share your lane with a motorcyclist, and so we can do those things. That's not happening yet. And we've been working with various entities to get more educational material out to car dealerships, not motorcycle dealerships. We need the car dealerships to say, hey, by the way, coming 25, you're going to, motorcyclists will be able to share the lane with you. And so my local club has been taken upon ourselves to go out to these car dealerships, go out to the, legal firms, that represent motorcyclists and accidents, et cetera, and say, how do we help get the word out to folks? Cause you're right. We do need to get to car drivers that this is not only the law, but here's why it's safe, et cetera. And that frankly has been hard to do.
You mentioned the signs on the side of the road, right?
Yeah.
Buckle up. It's, it's drunk driving season. Wear your seatbelt. Don't drink and drive. All the signs that we get.
Season.
Yeah. But no, but you get that,
shoot them?
No, but you get that like the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, or you get that like the holidays.
Sure.
Sober driver, blah, blah, blah.
But here's my thing. And again, I'm all for it, but it is illegal in the state of Pennsylvania to drive in the left lane. And there's giant signs up that say, if you're not passing, get your ass into the right lane. There have been studies done that driving in the left lane is actually, in some cases, more dangerous than drunk driving because of the accidents it creates by forcing people to pass on the right. And still, I drive to work on the freeway in a 50-mile commute, and there are people parked in the left lane, and God help my wife, because she sits there in the car with me sometimes, and there's like a vein on my forehead that comes out, and I'm freaking out because this one asshole is going 55 in the left lane in a 70. So I would love to think that if we put a billboard up on the freeway, that people would be like, oh, cool. I'm going to just let motorcyclists fly by me. But my suspicion is people are just going to gloss over. And I'm also worried about, you're talking about public perception, and there's two different people, right?
Yep.
There's Phil, and Phil's mentioned AtGat a couple of times. That's all the gear all the time, for those of you that are not familiar with the reference. So you got Phil on a BMW and is all the gear. Maybe Phil's wearing a high-vis helmet and he's politely filtering through the lane, and then he gets back over. That's not the motorcyclist that most people are familiar with.
That's true.
Most people are familiar with the asshole in flip-flops and short shorts.
Give him a name. You gave Phil a name. Give him a name.
I'm not going to give him a name. And they're flying by on a sport bike without an exhaust on it, and they're just doing whatever they want and they don't care. And so that's the problem that I think in my mind that we're up against is that like no one thinks about Phil. No one's like, the person we're trying to help out is the one that's trying to be respectful and do it legally and just create a more, I don't know, beautiful society.
You're right. And so
I don't expect you to have an answer for that, but like in my mind,
you just wanted to yell for a while.
I have an answer for everything.
Okay, good.
You talk about education, and yes, to your point, the sign that says, left, slow traffic in the left, move over, blah, blah, blah. At some level, it's got to be multifaceted. It can't be. So the other day, I was going to have it in front of me, but I got my motorcycle tabs in the mail, right? So here's your tabs, whatever. In there was
what's a motorcycle tab? I don't know what that is.
Sorry. License fee.
Oh, like
so your registration
registration sticker.
Gotcha.
Yep. Okay. So I put my tabs on my bike, but in that was a little flyer that said, coming in 2025 is, motorcycle lane splitting. That's all it said. Now, I'm a motorcyclist. Everybody in the motorcycle community in Minnesota knows that this is coming. What I want is when I get my car registration in the mail, that's where the education needs to happen. So you talk about the multifaceted education piece. And where do you educate people? On the sign on the road is part of it, but we've actually had people who teach 55 and older classes to get their insurance discount, right? Come to me and say, "Hey, can you come present to my class about this new law? Can I build this into my infrastructure? Can I build this into the 16-year-olds getting their driver's license permit? How do we start educating people on the front end and the back end and the middle?" And so it's a constant flow of information about why we're doing this. And you can only imagine the amount of time, energy that all sucks out of people to kind of go, man, how do we do this? Yeah. And so I'd love to be able to have the state of Minnesota to say, here's exactly what we're going to do. And it's going to be this, multifaceted educational campaign because I see it, how it can work. But there's just a lot of moving parts in that wheel.
It's interesting. I just like to pause for a second and say, it's interesting that what I was going to ask is sort of like, what's the next step here? Because I know from reading the article, quick shout out to Dustin's article on Common Tread about this interview with you and Andy Goldfein, that this budget, you said there's $200,000 set aside for creating awareness, right?
Yep.
And my, in my head, where my head goes right away is sort of like, cool, well, you don't have to ask people to agree with this.
Right.
Now it's a law.
Right.
So you can just tell people this is what's allowed. Please get ready or understand. I'm just asking you to understand that this is the law. We're not asking you like whether you agree with it or not. Frankly, doesn't matter because your time to protest was before. Now it's passed and this is it. But it sounds like your point of view is one of we still need to ask for acceptance, basically, because. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that because you feel like the cultural aspect of everyone being on board is important, or you feel like that's just the nicer way to do it and people will respond better?
I think both.
Laws are overturned too, right? Like
never
I've seen that happen.
No,
I'm pretty sure.
Stop it. No,
listen.
Cut.
I taught U.S. government for like 2 years in public high school before I gave up that career, and I'm pretty sure laws can be overturned. Zach.
Why you got to go there, right?
No. I guess. That is totally fair. It does seem like there'd really have to be a pretty catastrophic like. In the same way that motorcyclists are not on people's minds, for the sort of good reasons, they're often not on people's minds for the bad reasons either, right? Like it does seem like you'd really have to send like an atomic GSXR into the state house, for anyone to be like motorcycles are a big enough problem to overturn a law. That's my, that's my hot take there. But I do think I would like you to talk a little bit about why you think. Why my outlook, my initial sort of like trigger in my brain was the wrong one, which is like, just tell people that this is the way it is now, because that's what they need to know rather than like, try to glad hand them a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I do think, yes, I want to be nice about it because you want to kind of.
We're from the Midwest also.
Right. Yeah. Let's have a conversation about this before we actually do it.
Right.
But it is, it's a conversation, but also you want to make sure people are doing things the right way. Right. And I've actually said this in any kind of media interview we've done is I don't want people to be doing this prior to January or July 1 of 25 because you're going to, people are going to be upset about it. You want there to be kind of this, soft, Midwest, nice thing, but hey, this is coming to your road near you. Pay attention. Now there's also penalties in the law. Like if you get caught, impeding a motorcyclist from doing this, it's a petty misdemeanor. We're the only state in the country that actually has a penalty if you actually are a car and you try to impede somebody. Now, granted, you're gonna have to prove it, and authorities would have to be able to show it. But it actually, if you're impeding somebody from doing this, you're breaking the rules.
That's interesting.
So it's kind of both. It's the carrot and the stick, right? So the carrot is let's get education there. The stick is it's legal. If you don't like it, sorry, but you can't stop people from doing it.
Well, I would imagine the awareness part of it too is what leads to the safety. And this gets back to like my original pitch in an article that I wrote that I talked about earlier, where it's like, if you create that awareness, it's creating awareness for motorcycling in general, right? Like, because right now people aren't paying attention to motorcycles, to Zach's point. So like if they're getting those pamphlets in the mail, if they're having it talked about and people are at least aware of it, it's going to help that pill go down a little bit harder or a little bit easier, even if they're not in favor of it. They're going to sit there and say, oh, well, this is why I saw that person flying by me on the highway, because they're allowed to do this. Now, maybe they shouldn't have been flying by as fast as they were. Right. But then they're just a regular speeder. They're not somebody that's actually breaking, another law too. Yeah.
Another piece I forgot to mention earlier, when we talked about, state troopers and, during the legislative testimony is they said it'd be hard to enforce this law to be able to pull a motorcyclist over because if they're, splitting lanes, we can't get to them. Right. And we have no, in my hometown of Eagan, where I live now, they do have a couple police officers mounted on bikes, but the state troopers don't. Very few states actually do. And so they said, well, it's going to be impossible for us to catch these people that are doing it illegally. So a few legislators asked, well, what happens now if people are doing it? And they actually have record of X number of tickets they've given out for illegal lane splitting. So they were pulling people over. So at some level, it's kind of calling people on, well, we can't enforce this. Well, you're already enforcing when they break the law. So I don't know what, South Dakota, for example, is going to have, motorcycles, all over the state, which is kind of cool.
You mean motorcycle
police officers?
Yeah. I had a California highway patrol officer tell me the same thing, pulled me over in a car, and did not give me a ticket, was a very reasonable, polite gentleman, and just sort of asked me to reassess my conduct. But he told me, he said, we talked about lane splitting briefly, and he was basically like, if traffic is moving slow and you want to get away and I'm in a car, like there's nothing I'm going to be able to do. And I feel like I tell that story not to encourage motorcyclists to be reckless. I tell it as I think that was a very kind thing for that officer to say to me, because, and what that told me was sort of like, me telling you that you can get away with it in the right scenario is me asking you to just do it politely, please. And that was part of the conversation, was he sort of like, we talked about the way I was moving between cars, and he sort of said, did you need to be doing it like that? And I said, no, you're right. And he said, okay, cool. I want you to think about that and just sort of, be more, thoughtful and less urgent with your movements. And I thought that was a good conversation. And I guess that goes back to what I was saying about your outlook on this, Phil, which I think is the right thing to do, which is sort of like to try to have everyone paddling the same direction rather than say like, nah, boo boo, we got this law passed, so now we'll do whatever we want.
Absolutely.
I think it's the old adage too, like locks on cars keep, honest people honest. It doesn't stop criminals from stealing cars or breaking into your house or whatever, right? Like,
right.
I think that there's people out there in all states that are lane splitting illegally. And
Yes.
the truth of the matter is, like, it is probably more difficult for police to catch them. Not that they can't, but it is more difficult. But the people that are conscientious riders are the majority. I think that reckless, lawbreakers like Zach speeding down the highway in his Prius, are probably the minority. But like, I think that's what we're trying to get at here. Is we're trying to put something in the law that makes sense for motorcyclists, and we're saying let's do this the right way. We're not going to force anyone to do it, but hopefully, we're putting some things that help to make it, recognizable, which in the long term could have some good positive effect for all.